Dr. Boyle, we really appreciate the time. I want to talk about some of your latest books and things that are available, and tell folks the titles of those. Very, very scholarly, but also riveting reading because it is such veritas. Specifically, an example of what one guy can do, though. You did represent a major bloc of the Balkans and was able to stop the UN in the West from breaking up Bosnia-Herzegovina and causing a new giant civil war and ethnic cleansing. That's on the record. And so it's an insight into what one guy can do, standing up and being moral, but it's also an example of the type of behavior we see from the UN and others. So briefly, tell folks that story, and then tell us about, of all the books you've written, what you think the most important reading is.
Well, for our current situation here in America, I've written 2 books that I think could get people oriented, and that would be Tackling America's Toughest Questions, Clarity Press, and then the second, Protesting Power, War, Resistance, and Law. How to use law and the Constitution to oppose further warfare here by the United States government and a police state. So I've written 15 books, but I think those would be the 2 most relevant to our current plight, and indeed that's why I wrote those 2 books, to try to provide some light and a direction out of where we are now. Yes, as for Bosnia, sure, the United Nations and the European Union were going to carve them up into 3 little pieces, rob them of the United Nations membership, destroy them as a state, and subject 1.5 million to 2 million more Bosnians to ethnic cleansing. We already had 2 million Bosnians subjected to ethnic cleansing. And behind these plans were, of course, the Clinton administration, Mrs. Clinton, now the Secretary of State, many people working for Obama today, and Mrs. Clinton used to work for President Bill Clinton, and the British and the French. They were and the Russians as well. But they were fully prepared to simply destroy this state and wipe out all of its people. And the UN bureaucracy, all their lawyers, went along with it. And so I could just say from my personal experience, I was Bosnia's ambassador to the World Court. I stopped this from happening. But the UN bureaucracy, bureaucrats, these people are completely rotten, corrupt, despicable, unprincipled, and fortunately mediocre. All their lawyers, politicians, diplomats are pretty mediocre people. But you certainly can't trust them. And number 2, however, I think we have to understand, I know there's people who in good faith believe the UN is going to take us over, or UN helicopters. The UN does what we tell them to do. If Mrs. Clinton calls up Ban Ki-moon, he hops to it and says jump, he says how high. And the same way with his predecessor, we got these people the jobs. So they use the UN as a cutout for what their agenda is, as they did on Libya, as they just tried to do on Syria, as they've tried to do on Iran.
Sure. I mean, the imperial forces need this quasi-democratic thing that the Security Council really dictates. And of course, I mean, the military-industrial complex created it in '45 with all these promises at Presidio, based there in San Francisco. And I'm not saying the UN is going to take America over. It's that these imperial, globalist, corporate, fascist forces that created it are trying to transfer powers into it because it's their puppet to then come in, like take here at the local level and jack up taxes, to basically give it to, corporate entities like GE. And then, yes, then the UN takes the blame. But you're right, it's a total cutout.
It's a cutout. And they're not going to give up power themselves, but they use the UN as a cutout. So I don't think you know, there are proxies, there are stooges, there are agents, and we have to look at them that way. The whole bureaucracy there at the UN, they simply can't be trusted. But the real decisions get made in Washington, London, Paris, Brussels for the UN.
Yeah. In closing, if you notice, the generals, the colonels I talked to, the CIA people that were actually in combat in Vietnam, people that live in the real world, they're all against these wars, the drones, the police state, the NDAA. And a lot of these people, like you were saying, aren't completely moral or perfect or even good guys. They live in the real world. And so the entire military is against all these wars and where we're going. Kind of like the German military didn't want to go into Russia. Not that they were even good. It's just that they were living in the real world. Hitler wasn't. He hadn't actually been at a command level. He'd been low level in the trenches, but at least he was military to a certain extent. Now we have all these academics and people who understand statecraft, deception, manipulation, but they still don't understand the real nuts and bolts. And so you have the bureaucratic elite and the corporate owners who are becoming more and more detached from reality and who make 40-to-1 bets, like Corzine, trying to command a military and a huge system through their arrogance to launch something. And I know they're watching these shows, at least their minions are. They need to understand there's a reason the military's against this here and in Israel. There's a reason the British military's against it, because they're living in the real world. And it is so creepy. I mean, you know, hundreds of years ago, the problem was the generals wanted wars because they'd be superstars, and the politicians had to hold them back. Now it's the other way around. The politicians are so crazy, they want to launch wars that are so huge and so dangerous, even the generals don't want a part of it. I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think that, you know, the military is used by these elites. If you read Kissinger, he had nothing but contempt for them, for the generals and the rest of them. He couldn't care less. And I think that's true for the elites, Mrs. Clinton, all the rest of them. You know, their children, their husbands, they don't serve in the military. So as far as they see it, they're just sort of a mercenary throwaway class to be used as they see fit.
Yeah, Kissinger called them dumb animals.
That's correct. And that, you know, I went through the same program at Harvard that produced Kissinger, Brzezinski, Huntington, Schelling, all the rest of them. That's their attitude towards the military. They're supposed to do what they're told to do. And I think, you know, at least the military understands the consequences of these decisions. Again, we had a very courageous guy like Admiral Fallon say there would be no war against Iran on his watch.
Well, Mullen went over to Israel and in a public speech said, you guys stage the USS Liberty. Don't do that again. This was an incredible shot against the bow. That means the Pentagon has intel that the Likudniks are looking to stage something.
That's true. I, for a period of time, was counsel to the Liberty survivors. My dad was a Marine who invaded Saipan, Tini, and Okinawa in World War II. The Marines are part of the Navy. And it's very clear Israel attacked the Liberty as part of a false flag attack. They were going to sink it and kill everyone and blame it on the Egyptians or the Syrians, the Arabs, to get us directly involved in that war. And fortunately, because of the great courage and heroism of the men of the Liberty, who, by the way, had no weapons, but they kept that ship afloat and survived and were able to tell the story. And yet, despite that, Israel and the neocons have so much power in Congress and the courts that no matter what we've tried to do to get justice for them, we've been completely shut down now since 1967. Now, I want to make it clear, I no longer represent them. They have another lawyer. He's giving it a try, but it doesn't look too good. I mean, we're talking 1967 here. This is over 45 years later. Many of these men are dying off, and I guess the theory is they'll all die off and the matter will disappear. But it was clearly a false flag attack. And President Johnson and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara when planes were mobilized on the Sixth Fleet to go rescue the Liberty from the Israeli attack, McNamara called them all back. And in my opinion, having studied this matter and researched the statutes, clearly McNamara should have been prosecuted for treason, as defined by the United States Constitution. People use the word treason all the time. It's incorrect. There's a formal, technical, legal word definition of treason set forth in the Constitution and in a United States statute. I researched this for the Liberty vets. Clearly, McNamara, who I take it was already acting pursuant to orders from President Johnson, committed treason against the United States of America and the Liberty vets. And here we are 45 years later, and they have no justice, no recognition. And it shows you the power of the Israel lobby here in the United States, in Congress, in the news media, to still cover this up.
Well, you're a constitutional lawyer, but this is in closing. I mean, for me, I've read the statutes on treason. It's when you aid a foreign military power against your own forces, or you try for a foreign power to overthrow your government. I mean, treason is opening the gate to let the enemy in. The ship's under attack. They're begging for help for hours. The jets are taking off. And I've talked to the generals and the admirals. In fact, a lot of them have died since I had them on. Who were there and were on the radio phone and said, I want to talk to the president. And I'm going from memory, but yeah, the president even came on the line and said, yes, we're not going to have an incident, recall those planes. And it's just amazing to see that definition. I mean, I'm correct in a layman's definition of treason, correct?
I think the Liberty, having researched it a while ago, my conclusion and the advice I gave them when I was serving as counsel to them was that McNamara definitely had committed treason as defined by the United States Constitution, and there is a statutory definition of treason further specifying it, yes.
Wow. All right. Well, Professor Boyle, that was a great 50-minute interview. I meant to do 15 minutes, but it's always riveting talking to you. God bless you, and I hope we turn this around so we don't end up being political prisoners. I think if they start trying to round folks up, though, down the road, even in a war, I don't think everybody's going to line up and do what they're told. It's just quite a mess we're headed into.
I'm afraid it is, and all we can do is keep struggling. And those two books I mentioned will try to give your listeners some information and background and materials that they can use to formulate their own opinion and their own conscience as to what they should do now, right? Because we're facing a World War III and a military police state right in the face here. And remember, there's an election in 2012. We could have another October surprise. If it looks like Obama's losing, maybe the only way he could win would be to launch an attack on Iran or Syria.
Well, a year ago, the neocons were in the papers saying, get behind an Iran attack and we'll leave you alone, we'll support you. I mean, it's all an open conspiracy against liberty. And for good old boys out there that are like, oh, I'm behind killing the Iranians at a tribal level, they need to understand the globalists don't care about the Iranians or us either. When freedom goes, we're all going to get hammered by this. Thank you so much, Dr. Boyle.
All right. Thanks a lot, Alex. Have a good week.
Thank you. Yeah, have a great weekend. Wow, that was an amazing interview. Great job to the crew. And I will, Lord willing, see you back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. with the radio show, and back Monday, of course, with INFOWARS Nightly News. And that is it for myself and the crew. Great job, folks, and great job to all the subscribers out there. If you're watching elsewhere on the web and want to support us and see it when it first airs and all the archives and 9 years of material, PrisonPlanet.tv or InfoWarsNews.com. We've got a 15-day free trial we're running right there.